Hi everyone, welcome to ThinkLead, a digital leadership ecosystem. And this is where we help leaders think and lead on a whole new level. We know that we all have to start thinking about many things, organizations, ourselves, our people, society, on an unprecedented level, and we have to lead on that same level. A different world we are in. So we will be placing leaders on this platform who are on the front line, on the fringe, leading. We'll be asking them two things: what they're thinking and where they're taking their thinking to, and how they are leading, so that we can help you as a leader out there. These are really unprecedented times. So we're very excited. I say we because with me is my colleague and partner, Brian Eagar, who felt very strongly that we needed to do this, get some top leaders on panels and discuss these important matters, especially as far as leadership is concerned. So Brian is an executive coach, advisor to many top leaders, and he'll be running these conversations with me, also taking some minutes, just some thoughts, and at the end give us a brief summary of what we can take away. But of course you will take away what you want to. So Brian, good to see you. Are you excited doing this?
You cannot believe, as you hit the record button, I wanted to jump up and start waving my hands. It's almost like a dream. It's a very difficult time at the moment. It's almost like a dream come true to bring people of this ilk, this caliber onto the platform, to listen to the folk that we're engaging with is really special. So, Adriaan, as you indicated, I will support where and when needed. I'm also learning how to operate on a platform of this nature. So, yeah, I'm here to learn, and I'm eager to get going. So over to you, and over to the gents. Welcome, gents.
Let me quickly introduce you because we want to get to the meat of this. Our three guests are Xolile Sizani, the CEO of Servest. It's one of the largest facilities management organizations out there, and they do a lot of things. He can take a few seconds when he speaks first. But tens of thousands of employees all over the country, and of course going through their own challenges, no doubt, in these difficult times. So we look forward to hearing from him. We've got Ben Johnson, CEO of ER24, people out there saving lives. And I'm quite excited to hear about his business, obviously an essential services business, I would guess, and there are people out there all the time. And then we have Professor Eltie, economist, professor extraordinaire. In the good old days with former President Nelson Mandela, he was ambassador to the EU, Belgium, Luxembourg, but still serves on boards, very active, and very strong views on what's happening from a leadership perspective. So, gentlemen, absolutely welcome again.
Thanks, Adriaan. Pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's start with a very simple open question. How difficult has it been leading in this time? It has been difficult, but I'm assuming it has been difficult. On my screen, I've got Xolile on the left, so I'm going to go from the left to the right.
Go first.
But just in the meantime, Xolile?
No, thank you, Adriaan and Brian, and thank you to my co-panelist. I think of course, I mean, to everyone has been going through a hard time. Leading in this environment is very, very difficult. And I also believe that this could not have happened at an opportune time. The COVID, that is, and all the challenges that it raises. You will remember not so long ago, there's been early as last year, a lot of hype around what this fourth industrial revolution means. So what COVID has done for many organizations is to push us. In as much as we've been contemplating these innovative ideas, these new ways of leading, what the COVID environment has actually done is to push us. And again, I'll engage further, but I think for me, and I think many leaders, we are human beings. And I think the other part of leadership that has not been recognized a lot is a notion that leaders are supermen. And I think the COVID environment is beginning to allow people out there to look at leaders and recognize that, in fact, they are also scared. They are also under enormous pressure, a lot of anxiety. And we can only wish all leaders, the best under this circumstances. And again, as I said, I'll engage further in terms of what the other ideas are. But I just wanted to recognize the opportunities that COVID presents, and that we are human beings, and that we are expected to go through a lot of anxiety during this time.
Thank you, Xolile. Thank you. That's being vulnerable and realizing we're all human. Ben?
Yeah, I mean, just to come into a lot of what was said there, I think the biggest challenge is that you're in this completely new. This is new. I mean, none of us have ever been through a pandemic of this nature. I mean, the virus itself, no one knew. We don't know what it does. Obviously, that type of thing is coming out now through research. But as a leader, you're expected to provide certainty to your employees, to clients, in this very, very, very uncertain world. And I think that for me is been one of the biggest challenges, is how do you create this certainty in such an unstructured environment. And you also, obviously, again, you've got business as usual that you're trying to manage, and you've got this future world that none of us, people have varying opinions, but none of us today know what the next 6 months is going to be like. And yeah.
Sure, that's a interesting point. People expect certainty in very uncertain times. Thank you, Ben. And just now I want to come back to you, Jensen, and you'll tell us a little bit more about the essence of your businesses and how it has impacted it and the change in your thinking. Let's talk to our Prof here. Prof.
Yeah, it's a great privilege to be part of this, Adriaan. Brian, I think, and to have the co-panelist here, I think it's an important time in the life, not only of South Africa as leaders here, but worldwide. It has opened the world of leadership from the most important leaders of nations to ourselves here in companies that, also spans the entire spectrum of size, of type of industry. And for me personally, I've come to realize the frailty, the humanness of leaders, and the fact that, in this time, you have to be so innovative, but you can't rely on yourself only. You have to actually dig deep into the smallest, the most insignificant of your team to actually stay the course, but also to be a leader. We are all at different places using the platforms that we have. So it is a trust that you have to develop, but it is also a humility in exercising that trust that you have to actually develop. A humility that when you're in the office, you walk around, you, Mr. Man, or Miss Woman, but here you are remote, and you have to rely on transmitting a message that will still influence and still lead in the remotest part of a place where someone else might be sitting and listening to you, giving instructions, and instructions aren't the way to go anymore. It is everybody working together.
Thank you, Prof, so much. Gentlemen, let's just share. You've touched points that I feel like I want to expand on already, and I'm sure it'll come full circle. Powerful points. Just give us your latest thinking with regards to this entire experience. You've touched on some of it, of course, but go a little bit deeper. Your latest thinking, it could be about the virus, it could be about leadership, about organization, about economy. You're all in your own space. So your thinking is not necessarily going to be in the same space. So I want to know your latest thinking, and then we'll zoom in a little bit more as we go on. So anyone, what's your latest thinking about this crazy experience?
I think, Adriaan, and again, we might not appreciate this, but nothing happens by mistake. Everything in life is actually happens for a reason. Now, a newborn child, doesn't go from just being born into running. You go through a progress in life. So you go from crawling, standing, walking, and running. So what that implies, in my thinking, as you have asked, is that our own leadership education, our own leadership experiences have actually prepared us for this. But because we are in it now, many of us do not have the time to reflect that, in fact, the bulk of the solutions to the problem that we will be navigating through, in spite of the fact that we have not been in this environment before, but our being has prepared us for this. So I want to go back to my own reflection on leadership. Studying leadership, there were certain characteristics that have always been accentuated for a successful leader. One of those is a concept of a high leadership. So you are high on task orientation, and also you are high on relationships. Now, the Prof has mentioned this. The extent that you have been leading in an organization truly by being focused on tasks is not going to be the best approach under these circumstances. You're going to require to set up, in fact, if you had been a leader in the past during the normal days, where you have had a orientation around tasks, but also relationships, because you're now going to be calling upon those relationships. The trust that the Prof mentioned, those things are going to be critical. My team, for example, because I have faith and trust in them, I don't worry that I have not spoken, I have not seen them over the last 40-something days, right? But I have trust in that we communicate, they understand the vision, they are carrying on under these circumstances, because the trust relationship was developed and built before we got into COVID. So that's one theory that is important, that I have embraced my leadership style, and it's becoming useful to help me make sense of this environment. So put that one aside. The second philosophy is around what are the characteristics of a true leader, right? A true leader in this environment, in fact, that's what the theory says, he has to be a team player, he has to have a business acumen. Thirdly, he has to have high tolerance for ambiguity, right? So even in my selection of team members that I now have to lead under these circumstances, I've made sure, other than the normal requirements in terms of experience and education, whatever you, I've made sure that I've appointed people that have a high level of tolerance for ambiguity. I have made sure that I have appointed colleagues that have business acumen. I have made sure that I focus on employing colleagues that have a understanding of teams and also can play and take part as members of the teams. Those elements are becoming essential now, because I'm in an environment where there's a lot of ambiguity. So having brought individuals and focus on bringing such individuals, I am comfortable that they will not panic and throw their toys out of the court because we are in this environment of uncertainty. So I guess the point that I'm just reflecting on in relation to your question is about what is my thinking as a leader under these circumstances. And I'm saying my entire education, training, and experience has in fact prepared me for this day. And therefore I have, to a larger extent, the ability to make sense of some of the things that are happening, because I have built the necessary building blocks over my entire career to make sure that I can make sense of something. I'm not perfect. I mean, this thing is always evolving every day, but I'm saying I have been using, or I try and reflect on what I've learned, what my leadership character has been, and I'm trying to use that to the best of my ability to navigate this environment.
Okay, Xolile, thank you. I mean, so we've got to trust we've been prepared for this somehow from the past. You know, if you think that everything you've been taught or learned that you've learned is a waste of time, then you're really in trouble now, I guess. So that's very good. Then you've touched on some really key points, which I want the others to expand on, or give your view on what Xolile is thinking in sense, Ben. And
I mean, just to come in there, I think in what you were saying as well, as a leader, you've got to allow yourself to open up. So yes, you know, our history and our training and what you've learned, but in this type of situation, that it's such an unknown situation, you've got to become open. You cannot be closed to ideas and things like that. I think also just to touch on some of the trust in the relationship and the teamwork aspects. I mean, from our perspective as an emergency service, I mean, my team, I'm talking EO24 as a collective team, have to trust that when we're asking them to go out onto the front line, and we're expecting them to go and treat patients, and they're interacting with patients that potentially have COVID or have the symptoms, that the systems we put in place, the research that we've done, the documentation we're reading, the policies and guidelines we put into place for like personal protective equipment, isolation procedures, they're going to trust us because we're sitting in an office. Some of us are working from home, and they're going to just trust. And that you don't build in a day. I mean, trust is built over a long period. And I think touching on that other aspect is relationship. It's not task. You will now go, and you've got to pull together as one big team, and that relationship that you have with your team, with your employees, is key. Because I think in our environment, we're asking our guys to go and do things that, I mean, you've seen it globally from a healthcare perspective. And team. I mean, I think team is key. And I must say, I'm fortunate that I've got a very strong ER24 team and a very strong immediate team that we pull together. We meet twice a week. It's open discussion. It's not a hierarchy. It's just open, and we are just throwing ideas around about what the future is going to look like. And I think that's my biggest concept, actually, is when I sit on the weekend. What is the future? Not for me or my family. It's broader than that. What is the future of the country? What is the future of society? Yeah. In 8 months' time, what's this world going to look like, and how do we fit in it? I mean, it's busy.
I like the point you're making there about, I think both of you on relationships. And relationships don't spring up over a year or a few months. And this is where leadership has to really invest, is the word, in relationships of your team. And in this circumstance, I think it is even more important that you can build on those relationships, but also develop new ones, even on this platform. You have to be, and this is the word I'd like to bring to the table now, is the adaptability. A leader must have the potential to bring new ideas, and there comes innovation in an environment such as we are now. The old doesn't work anymore. No. It's a new game. It's a new ball game. So adaptability and knowing, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where can we move into? I mean, I look at the companies I serve on, and they from paint manufacturers to property developers and owners of property. How do we adjust in circumstances that have shut down, retail shops that we are letting? So what do we do now? So that adaptability of a leader is not only in times of tranquil, calm seas. No, it's exactly at times when a tsunami hits you and you have to say, what next? We have these occurrences in a regular way, but not as exogenous and as strong, as impactful as this virus has hit us. And the beautiful thing is, you're not alone in this. So you can gain strength from others. The unfortunate thing is the unequal way of the impact. It's hit some people on their balance sheets, some people on their income. Normally those hit on the income is worse off, because income, you can't go and generate easily. On the wealth side, there's a different ball game there. So, you have to internalize and work with all of these circumstances. The point I'm making is that adaptability becomes very important. And keeping your eye on the ball, what's your purpose? Where are we going as an entity? Vitally important.
Okay, Brian, we've had 2 rounds of really good comments. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking?
So what I've enjoyed so far is lonely and scared. Let's accept the fact that it is lonely. You gentlemen sit in positions of authority, and more often than not, as much as you can call on others, input, for guidance, for consultation, it is lonely and it is scary. And that's what Xolile started chatting about. Ben, you spoke about uncertainty. None of us know what's going on. I don't think this is, we speak of and we reflect back to previous challenges, Spanish flu, the world wars, but the amount of uncertainty that we've had to deal with, it's unprecedented, as Adriaan has shared. We spoke about the world of leadership, and that we are frail, but we need to be innovative. There's the element of humanity. We mustn't forget those around us. We mustn't forget those that are not in the positions like we are. And we spoke about compassion, having compassion for those. And then we spoke about a message that we need to keep reminding ourselves of all the time, and that is we're managing or leading in remote ways, so let's not forget being compassionate to those when we engage with them because of the remoteness, and that's what you spoke about. I enjoyed everything so far, but specifically this high tolerance for ambiguity. I mean, that brings a perspective that we're all aware of, but it's appreciating what this actually means, because none of us, it's back to that uncertainty. It's knowing that you've got your teams around you, and it's knowing that, and this is the part that I've enjoyed most, that you can't all of a sudden in this position, as all three gents have said, call on your relationships and call on your experiences if you've not made the time to build those relationships. And all three have said those relationships that you have now, you've nurtured and you've built them up over the many, many years. So to be able to call on them now makes absolute sense. And that's a big lesson for any leader out there. If you've not invested and built up time around your relationships, well, you really are going to be up the proverbial creek without a paddle. So I really did enjoy that. And I think the last thing that's come across is in all of this, while we don't know where, what, and how, we have to remain adaptable and flexible. So that's what I picked up so far. The biggest thing that I've enjoyed is this leveraging of your relationships, leveraging of past strengths. And that's the lesson to go into the future. Keep those relationships strong.
Gentlemen, I want us just to take a few minutes on how do we lead in the next 6 to 9 months, given the uncertainty. But I want you to think of a leader also who maybe hasn't invested sufficiently in that trust. And let's say I'm a CEO, just came into the position beginning of this year, and then COVID struck. We're not all in a good position where we've had to build our team for several years. But just keep those things in mind as you talk about the next 6 to 9 months. How you are going to lead? Do you think what you do differently because the world is so different? And what can you say that'll help any leader out there prompt their thinking a little bit more?
Can I start off? I'm in a different position because I'm not at a company. I'm at various companies where I'm a director. And when this thing struck, I immediately thought of the loneliness of the CEO, of the leader. And consecutively, from time to time, I picked up the phone and called the CEO and just expressed I almost said condolences, my sympathy, my empathy with his position. And how can I help you? Now, there's a big discussion always about directors and boards of directors that must stay away from managing. But it's good for you to pick up your phone, and not only as a director, but as a CEO, to pick up that phone and call those, not in the formal platform discussion meetings that we have, but just pick up the phone and ask him about his kids, ask him about his wife. How are you coping with this very unusual, unprecedented circumstance that we find ourselves in? So I would really encourage for the next 6 months, 9 months, to go beyond, it's a beautiful saying, to go beyond that which we know and go to the unknown, the unprecedented, by saying, guys, are you fine? And get to know them a little bit more personally so that you can recount a story and be able to latch onto his story because you know something more about. I think it's a motivation that goes beyond the work. I would like to see myself as a leader that goes beyond that task that I drive. The purpose is success, but the way to get to the success cannot only be the platform of meetings or the output that this person has to bring to you or present to the company, but it goes beyond that. Another way of getting to that, an additional way, is that type of personal contact that I would have with all of my directors, but also with the CEOs from time to time, just to hear, guys, are things still fine, and have not a trivial discussion, but something that is a little bit more light.
Okay, gentlemen, as you add what you think we should do in the next 6 to 9 months, I want to, in my mind, chew on that one. You know, you get so hung up on crisis management and managing this difficult situation and making sure we still connect with our team on the actions and so on. What about that additional warm, how are you doing call that just says, listen, this is not business. How are you doing? Comments, and then add to the recipe for the next 6 to 9 months. Xolile?
I agree with that approach. In fact, one of my HR director has made it a mission to call all of us and to set up calls where she's just trying to understand how we're doing and so forth, which I really appreciate. Because like I said, this can be quite an anxious time, a period of loneliness and feeling, you know, deserted because you don't have this human contact. So I think I agree with the Prof that is something that is important. With regards to leading over the next coming months, you see, with the uncertainty that exists, one of the challenges that many leaders have is the idea that you want to know. You know, you can't make decision in abstract. You know, you need to make the right decision all the time. But I think over these next months, something that we've started to do a lot of in our business is to start planning scenarios. Scenario planning allows you to make a certain number of assumptions and look at what the impact of those assumptions are in your business. So a scenario planning of what the best case scenario could look like, the worst case scenario could look like, the reality of your situation. Unpacking all of those scenarios and have a conversation as a team as to how you think you will navigate. What is the middle ground between the two? It helps because suddenly you don't get stuck in decision making because you don't have this information or that information, but you do allow yourself to make assumptions about what if this happened, what if this didn't happen, how would we manage around those cases. So that really helps, and I think it's an important part of how we should be leading a lot over the next coming months. Scenario planning. The second one is about, we have to reflect into our businesses. We have to look back as leaders and understand what are our strengths, what are our capabilities, what are our resources. Just have a reflection on those and ask yourself, because I believe that COVID is going to be with us for a very long time. And therefore the manner and the approach and the way in which we're going to do things going forward is going to be integrated with the consciousness of this pandemic. And again, to reflect as to how can you re-engineer your current resources, your current capabilities, in order for you to maximize the opportunities that are going to come up as a result of COVID. I always say to my team, you should never let a good crisis go to waste. So in spite of the challenges that the COVID has brought to our attention, there are plenty of opportunities that it is also allowing us to take into account. So we must not be blind to those opportunities. We really have to relook at our businesses, look at our strengths, our capabilities, and objectively analyze where we can re-engineer our businesses in order for us to maximize the opportunity. So those two things, I think, are going to be critical for any leader going forward. Forecasting, planning scenarios, and also re-engineering your business.
Thanks, Xolile. Some practical advice there. Some really good thoughts. We're coming towards the end where we'll ask you just to give us final thoughts on what you've been thinking and with regards to leading towards the end for leaders. But let's just get Ben's input as well about the next 6 to 9 months?
Yeah, just to touch on some of those points, I think we made a conscious decision about 2 weeks ago, because we had been in COVID crisis for so long, just as a team, let's just get back to some semblance of normality. COVID is not going anywhere. That's the reality. So, and I think we're trying to tick over with the business as usual, with a focus on COVID. And touching on those relationships outside of work, just having a view. I mean, fortunately at ER24 and even within the group, Mediclinic, I mean, I've been working with my direct boss for almost 15 years. So we can have a discussion and a how are you and a complete conversation, just putting work out there. I think it's very important, even on the weekend, just you have to have that time out. You can't be in permanent crisis or permanent work all the time. It's important to have that sort of time out for yourself.
Yeah.
But just touching on collaboration again, because this is I suppose primarily a healthcare issue. We've fortunately reached out. We've actually got a WhatsApp group with a whole lot of emergency service companies or paramedics professionals sharing. I mean, there's guys in Turkey, there's guys in the UK, Australia, just sharing what's going, because we're all obviously in different stages of the pandemic. So getting information and obviously making decisions. And I think just touching on, I think our plans or what's going to hit us for the next 6 to 8 months. Well, I think there's enough modeling to suggest that this surge will come. It is. And I think we have flattened, we are going to talk about flattening that curve. We have done that to a degree. So a lot of our focus is going to be on managing a foreseeable disaster situation, which is not, we're not untrained for that. In the pre-hospital environment, we trained for this. You know, we actually spend time practicing, learning how to manage disasters. But that is going to take, again, relationships, because we're going to be talking to government, talking to other industry, other services, hospitals. It's going to be trust. It's going to need everything that you can pull together as a leader to get through this next 6 to 8 months. And on top of that, we still have a business to run. We've still got employees that need certainty. We've still got margins. You still need revenue. You can't forget that. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting 6 to 9 months, I would say.
So, James, just gather your final thoughts on how we should think and lead in these difficult times. But Brian, do you have a question that you want to pose to these gents as you've been listening?
Not really a question, just an observation that I've picked up from what our guests have been sharing. The reality of the positions we're in. So what I've picked up is, while we've got to run these businesses, keep these businesses going, we've got to be very aware of how we do this. So how do we keep these businesses going? And that's the normal run-of-the-mill type stuff in these very difficult times, using remote engagement. At the same time, it's the human element I've heard a lot of. I've heard Ben talk about it, Eltie talk about it, Xolile talk about it. And I think what's important for those that are going to hear this, and that's, remember, as I said at the outset, the biggest driver for this is, what can others learn from what you've shared? And what I've picked up from what others can learn from what you've shared is, you've got to keep the business going. So, yeah, I've got to keep it going. You've got to remain very engaged, reach out, touch, your colleagues where you can, with good words, with asking questions around how they are. And I've just made a note of a few things which I've summarized based on what you shared, and that is compassion. I'm hearing a lot about being compassionate towards those folk. Xolile, you've said that. Eltie, you've emphasized. Ben, you said it now. I picked up around collaborate. You really got to work with your teams. You've mentioned it a couple of times. Clarity. Ben, provide clarity. Even in these very difficult times, how do you keep that clarity? How do you keep that, whatever clarity you can provide? But Adriaan, maybe one question that, based on these observations, maybe you can take it a little bit further, and that is both calm how do we remain calm? At the same time, the courage that it's going to take to lead us through the next 6 to 9 months. And maybe that's something we can think about, is how do we stay calm? Because I tell you what, Adriaan and I participated in a session last Tuesday evening, and there were a number of leaders sitting as part of the session. It was an informal get-together. Eltie was part of it, really informal, just people to share where they're at and what they're going through. And this word courage comes through. The type of courage that we're going to need to provide clarity, to ensure that there's compassion. How do we keep that going? So courage, yet at the same time remain calm.
Okay, so gents, as you think about that and maybe answer, how do we remain calm in these not so calm times, but then also round up your final thoughts on thinking and leading, in terms of what maybe you haven't had the chance to share. Start with Prof.
Yeah, I'm actually very impressed by the South African business community, in the sense that they've moved beyond that drive for profit, that very particular drive that is important in as far as any business has to look at the bottom line. But they've gone beyond that, the old saying that we've got a triple bottom line, and I think we've reached that to the point where the environment is more respected. I think this whole COVID lockdown has given us a new appreciation for the environment, but also the reaching out of big companies and medium-sized companies and even smaller companies to share the goods, so to speak, share the spoils, so to speak, with those that are less fortunate. I think in that respect, Ryan's question of calming people, when you give, you receive. And this is an old saying that, as you give, you are receiving. And that is a tranquilizing, a calming effect on those that are in power, those that have, and to those who are the recipients. So I think from that perspective, I'm very impressed by the South African business community that has really come to the party and made huge contributions. In fact, there's a greater altruism that has been brought to the table, and I trust that this will do the type of calming that Brian is speaking of.
Okay, Ben, and then Xolile.
Yeah, I think from looking at calm, I think the personality type that moves into emergency medical care, we thrive on a bit of sort of this uncertainty. I mean, it is a personality trait, and obviously my colleagues that I work with, they're all very similar people. And in saying that, I think having the team I have keeps me calm, because we're in it together. It's a shared accountability. No one's pointing fingers up and saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? It's about what are we doing? So I sleep at night knowing that as a collective, that we're in this together. And it's a sort of that shared responsibility. I think the other thing that can help, I've been a bit disappointed with the media and social media in general. I think you've got to have strong filters to try and cut out the negativity and the misinformation. But I think if you find credible information, and the government has done fantastically well with credible information that they put out through Twitter, on their website, I think if you educate yourself about this pandemic, about what's been going on in other countries, I think you can create a degree of certainty. I mean, it's by no way certain, but I think arming yourself with that information, you can just create a bit of certainty for yourself.
Thank you, Ben. Xolile?
For me, I think the remaining calm is quite important. And I think two practical tools that I found useful is scenario planning. Because you see, to the extent that you get surprised by events, your tendency to manage those events effectively also diminishes. However, if you take the time and effort to try and paint the scenarios, as to what could best be done and what could happen in the worst case scenario, and start thinking about your own ability to react and manage those scenarios, allows you, in the event that they do occur, to at least have an ability of being prepared for that, and therefore have the right tools in place to manage it. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is really about an integrated risk approach to this COVID. So again, it links back to scenario planning. However, with the risk approach, you begin to identify the key events, the key measures within your business that you need to manage and have a finger on the pulse around, right? And to understand what could the impact, if those events were to impact those measure indicators of performance, and what will the impact of that be, and the severity of that, the probability and the severity of that impact. So by then understanding that, you are able at least to put together some mitigation plans that can also help you to ease the crisis, or to ease the negative impact that you might face. So scenario planning is very critical as part of a calming and also just a management and leadership style, and also an integrated risk approach in how you manage certain critical events.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation, but I'm not letting you go just yet. I want you to spontaneously, and then I'll give Brian last sort of summary word. Imagine the political leaders, the command council is listening to this conversation. Imagine business CEOs and academia are all listening to this conversation. And of course they won't all, but we'll try. What is your final, from the heart, message to leaders out there? Just what would you say to that audience that's listening to you sincerely? And any of you jump in, but I'd like to hear from all three of you a very brief message.
I'll start. I think for me, it's around make a decision. Take the decision. You've got no right or wrong. All you can do is get as much information you can as possible and make a decision. And I get the sense we are in a bit of a limbo in terms of some firm decisions that need to be made. It doesn't matter. Keep lockdown, open the economy. There's no right or wrong answer. Both have massive impact, but you need to make that decision. And I think that would be my message. And it's, I think, for leaders in general in this time, make a decision and just stick by it.
Yeah. No, I agree with Ben. I think for me, it is the belief, the belief that, in fact, we have been prepared for this. Like you look at any history of formidable leaders, and you analyze how they have risen to become leaders, you see the events in their lives were always about preparing them for this day. You go to the Bible, you read the stories of David, you see the events that David was facing prepared him to face Goliath. So I think that's important. But as leaders, we must know this too shall pass. And therefore, we must never give up. This too shall pass.
100%.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement there. I think we just don't know when it shall pass. But it's an important thing to have an end to the situation in mind. In other words, you must have a vision that would better the situation as it is now. I think the biggest dilemma that we face is sometimes our own thinking, coming back to the topic, thinking thinking is such an important part of the solution. And as long as we don't get pulled away to a dichotomy of the situation between health and the economy, I think we're in a better position. If we can just say it's not a trade-off between saving lives and getting the economy going. These two are actually mutually supported. And we must get that message to the government that, you can't have the economy lag behind too long. The businesses that we as leaders lead need oxygen, just like the lungs need oxygen to survive the patient in this coronavirus environment. So the economy needs oxygen. You and I as leaders form the oxygen in our businesses to make the economy survive and have those people, especially those at the lower rungs of the economy, the unskilled, the poor. They don't have the balance sheets you and I might have. They are dependent on the basic things. We have a lady that works for us. She calls us every day, not because she doesn't have something to eat. Yes, that too. But she misses the environment in which she works. And I think getting this economy unlocked in stages much faster than we are doing at present is very important for the survival of the lungs of the country.
Thank you. Some wisdom there at the end. Thank you, Prof. Brian, a minute. Mr. Eagar, just sort of a summary feel. That's been really some good oxygen for me.
So much has been said by the three gents. And again, just very proud to be associated with you three gentlemen, Ben, in what you've shared, Xolile, and how you've shared, and Prof, how you've summarized what you've summarized. Lots of great messages. But I really like the last question that you put to the panel, Adriaan, and that is a final thought that you asked to each gent to answer, and that is a message out there to all those leaders. I mean, think about this for a moment. There's so many leaders out there that are sitting thinking about what it is that they've got to do and why they've got to do and how they've got to do. And we've spoken about courage and calm and compassion, but at least you've now provided something, and I think you provided it in a really nice way. You framed it in a very nice way. That something is a message that people can listen to. Those leaders can listen to something that you've shared. And I think that's just awesome. So very proud from the bottom of my heart, very proud of you three gents. And Adriaan, very proud of what you've asked as questions.
Xolile Sizani, CEO of Servest. Ben Johnson, CEO of ER24, Prof. Eltie Links. Gentlemen, leaders, thank you. Go lead. Thank you for your input and giving this time today in the midst of a crisis to just shoot the breeze with us about something very important. We absolutely appreciate it. That's ThinkLead, helping leaders think and lead at a whole new level. And we thank all our viewers out there for watching. We honestly hope that leaders enjoy every minute of this conversation today. Cheers, everyone.